Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Monday's edition, and we're broadcasting from beautiful Irvine, California. Happy to have you with us today. And folks, I got to tell you something. Remember how I always tell you, don't watch the Sunday shows, we'll watch them for you and report on the propaganda. It was astonishing to me. I mean, the raid on Lago dominated everything going on. Now, this thing has a double-edged sword to it, folks. Remember when Trump talked about when he ran for president back in 2016, he said he could stand up on Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, his supporters would still stick with him? Boy, was he right about that. I mean, here you have a week where, as many commentators on the right like to say, the Inflation Production Act, not the Inflation Reduction Act, was passed. Biden's going to likely sign it this week. You didn't hear a word about that. Every story everywhere is on Trump. And it sort of reminded me, of the Republican primary back in 2016. I mean, nobody could get oxygen because Trump sucked it all up. And now in this case, not only is he getting all the publicity going on right now, but everyone wants to know, why did it happen? I mean, think about this for a minute. You heard the stories. There's been wild media speculation, top secret information. Yeah, of course. Well, if it was so top secret, why did it take so long for him to go look for it? Nuclear information. Various charges. I'm sitting here saying, if everything in that thing was so damn important, then maybe it was. We just don't know. Then, again, why did it take so long? Trump's been out of office 18 months. Now, could there be a reason for that? Let's think. January 6th? Yeah, that's sort of going on right now. Maybe covering up the Russian fiasco? Maybe. Good possibility. We don't know. What we do know is there's a lot of Republicans really ticked off about this. And the interesting thing, even some Democrats are saying this. The Democratic Party actually had a little bit of momentum building up. Bear in mind, their voters are so stupid when they produce a bill called the Inflation Reduction Act, their voters actually believe it because they're so used to being lied to. And most of them are low information anyhow. But anyhow, when you have that situation going on, and this thing went all the way up to the White House. I mean, it'd be unfathomable that Merrick Garland would make a decision and not inform the White House. Now, maybe he talked to Ron Klain, Biden's chief of staff, and said, hey, don't bother the old guy about this. We got it covered. Maybe, who knows. But one thing they did not count on, folks. They did not count on voter enthusiasm being super high after the raid on the Republican side. Voters are generally shocked by this raid. It's effectively, we have a situation in hand now where not only Republican enthusiasm is high, Hispanics are not happy with what happened. Why? Well, we told you last week. If it can happen to Trump, it can happen to anybody. Now, the far left-wing radicals, they're gleeful. But they may be gleeful now. But when that turnout wave hits, we'll see how gleeful they are then. It's almost like the DOJ and the FBI have become the political arm of the Democratic Party. They're like the enforcers. And you have people, we've already seen two incidences, folks. You had the guy in Cincinnati who went and targeted an FBI building. There's no justification for that. Zero. He had a weapon, he ended up getting killed. And then you had some other guy over the weekend drive his car into a barricade at the Capitol, pulled out a gun and shot himself. So, again, action, reaction. Republican voters are now more enthused about Donald Trump than they've been in the past. More Republican voters are going to get out and vote in the general election as a result of this raid. Even some Democratic strategists are saying, what are we thinking? 90 days before a midterm election, and they pull a stunt like this. Now again, we don't know all the rest of the information because it's been, kept tight. Sure, the warrant was unsealed. That didn't tell you anything. Just told you basically they needed to grab some boxes and to take an inventory of them. Trump's demanded this stuff back, as rightfully he should. And then you have to ask yourself this question too. Most of the time when they have these warrants, the attorneys are there. They give the attorney the warrant. The attorneys get him the information, and that's it. Did they really need, what was the number, 14, 16, 18 agents with guns drawn going to Trump's place? I mean, come on. One thing you can say for sure about this, it was gross overkill. Yeah, they may have had a justification for getting the boxes. That'll come out. We don't know the answer to that question right now. But the strong-arm tactics that were utilized, that's what the country is saying, what the hell's going on here? First you have, what we call the Inflation Enhancement, the Inflation Production Act. That's right, it's going to do nothing to help inflation. You have that happen, and then you have this happen. What's the media talking about? This. Why? Because that's all anybody's talking about. Now, Trump, to his credit, came out, and this hit the wires yesterday, basically said we need to bring the temperature down. He's right about that. Okay, you don't want to have your supporters, attacking FBI buildings. You don't want to have people pulling out guns. That we never advocate anything remotely close to that. And Trump was wise to state that. And apparently he got some information to Garland about that. Is it too little, too late? Who knows? I mean, you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle, if you will. But this thing is really troubling on a lot of fronts. If there were top secret information in there, okay, again, I'm asking you the question. Why was it? He's been out of office 18 months. And I guarantee you when they packed up those boxes and left the White House, apparently they were all still packed up. Didn't even look like they'd ever been opened. But why 18 months? You've got to ask yourself that question. If it was so sensitive, why 18 months? Second point, if it's so sensitive, why were Trump's lawyers not allowed to be there? Why did they want the security cameras turned off at Lago when they were doing this? I mean, these are legitimate questions. There could be legitimate reasons why Merrick Garland and the DOJ and the Justice Department wanted this information back. Just common sense tells you it had to be more than just records. Maybe there were some secret papers there the government didn't want Trump to see. Who knows? And we're not going to start throwing out conspiracy theories here because we just don't know. But what we do know is this. We now have 14 whistleblowers that have come forward that want to testify according to Congressman Jim Jordan. Not just about this, but various other things that the FBI and the Justice Department has been doing, basically to Republicans and conservatives. I heard a lot of talk over the weekend comparing, Hillary Clinton's house never got raided. And she actually, her henchmen actually took hammers out and pounded out hard drives. No one ever, FBI came to Hillary Clinton's house. The FBI didn't do anything to Hunter Biden, but they do to Trump. Why? Because Trump's a threat. You know, let me segue this into some polling that we've seen. And you'll sort of tie it in and say, well, Mark, you know, how is this all tied in politically? I'll tell you how it's tied in. Joe Biden's approval rating had been in the mid to upper 30s. It ticked up in a Reuters Ipsos poll last week, 40%. Rasmussen had him around 42. So he ticked up a little bit. He's still 15, 16 points underwater. But he picked up a little bit. Now, all these Democratic strategists that come on these networks and lie and say, oh, no, the Democrats are going to keep control of Congress. No, they're not. The Senate's in play for sure. So why are they all panicked? What is it about Trump? I mean, if the last election was validated, and all indications are it was, I know a lot of people don't believe that, but states certified it. You know, if Biden won the last election, why are they so fearful of running against Trump again? I'll tell you why. A, Biden now has a track record. Actually, get a load of this, folks. We've talked about this. If Trump decides to run, he has a huge lead among Republican primary voters. But there will be a contested primary. We've talked about that, with or without President Trump running. But the interesting piece is this, and I'll tell you, this is why I think they're all panicked. In a head-to-head rematch with Biden, in a general election, and again, folks, polling doesn't mean a lot 2 years out, but Trump's up 3 to 5 points. That's a big deal. So the fear of Trump is what I believe is driving this. I don't believe for a second, yes, there could have been some national security documents in there. Maybe. We don't know. We're not going to comment on stuff we don't know about. But we have to ask the question, why 18 months and why not allow Trump's lawyers to be there? Why did this whole thing have to get blown up to this level? You know, everybody's asking the same question. So there's going to be a lot of propaganda probably on both sides that come out as a result of this. But the underlying piece is this. Did it have to go effectively to the nuclear option, or could it have been worked out from the Department of Justice and the FBI with Trump's lawyers? Ask yourself this question. If you're the DOJ, and you've already, obviously there's been communication going on, if the conversation went something like this, hey, listen, we've given you 3 chances to get us this stuff. Now look, this is your final shot. Either turn all this stuff over to us, or X. Well, or X could have meant sending a handful of people down, had the lawyers there, met them, and give them the boxes. And then maybe it doesn't turn into this full-fledged 90-day surprise. You know, we're used to surprises happening in October, not in August. All right, we spent enough time on that. Everybody's got their opinions. We're going to keep a close eye on it as things develop. And again, we're going to cut through the propaganda, but keep in mind those questions there. I mean, to me, until I hear a solid answer for those, I have to look very suspicious upon what happened here. I'm not saying Trump's innocent of everything. I'm not saying he did anything wrong either. We just don't know. But the tactics used seem to be way beyond the pale. All right, let's get into some other things really happening across the country right now. You know, we've talked a lot about what's going on down at the southern border, where Governor Ducey of Arizona and Governor Abbott of Texas are sending illegals to Washington, D.C., New York City. Okay, well, Arizona's now taking it on their own to build their own border wall. That's right, you heard it. Arizona is building a border wall. Things have gotten so out of control that they have no choice. Good for Arizona. Now, I know Texas was going to spend some resources on it too. And you know what? Doesn't it give you a little bit of a chuckle, folks? That here are these northern cities, Eric Adams, Sanctuary City, New York, Mario Bowser, Sanctuary City, Washington, D.C. They're in a panic because they can't handle the illegal immigrants. Well, no kidding. When you have an open border policy like Biden has, and you got a guy like Mayorkas down there directing an open border policy, the governors are just doing what makes sense. Their budgets shouldn't be overwhelmed because of this. But that's what's happening. Arizona taking it on their own in certain parts of the state to build a wall. Good for the state of Arizona. Now, in the really weird stuff, and this is really a good thing, you know, Governor DeSantis has a tendency to get in front of issues. And every chance he gets, he basically sticks it to the left. Now, for the infantile, tiny fraction of people that are actually transgender, the state of Florida has come out now and they're going to ban Medicaid from covering what's called gender-affirming treatments. My position on that is great, fantastic. This is insane stuff, folks. I mean, we've got nothing against people that want to be transgender. I mean, people in this country, they have a right to do what they want to do. But to have the state pay for that stuff? And to jam that crap down our kids? No, No. Again, this is what the left does. They take a tiny, minute fraction of the population. And folks, it is tiny. And they trump it up, no pun intended, believe me. And now the state of Florida reacts positively. So again, on all these flashpoint social issues, whether it's, education, a la Virginia, look what happened. Florida, when the left tries to jam their ideology down your throats, well, the right's fighting back. Good. We're glad for DeSantis. Now let's talk a little bit of international stuff going on here. We had the Pelosi trip to Taiwan. China ramped up their military operations. They even fired missiles over Taipei. A close friend of mine grew up in Taiwan. Now, a congressional delegation is wrapping up a visit in Taiwan now. Well, what has China done? Extended some military operations. Look, they even shot missiles over Taipei. I mean, that's how insane things got. President Xi is looking for a third term. And things in China are not going as well as they had hoped. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the show. But here again, a congressional delegation goes to Taiwan. Congressional leaders meet with Taiwanese leaders, and I believe they're heading back today. Why is that so hard for the Chinese to get? And what do? More faux military operations. Now look, speaking of military, have you noticed the damage that U.S. missiles have been inflicting as a result of the Ukrainians using them? My goodness. Some of these U.S. missiles have been critical in aiding Ukraine in their fight against the Russians. Now, you've seen horrific scenes continuing to come out of Ukraine. What does Moscow do? It hits civilian facilities again. But make no mistake about it, some of these weapons that the United States and NATO have delivered to Ukraine is helping at least cause this war to be a stalemate. Ukraine is taking steps to take back previously conquered Russian territories. And in no small part to what the United States and NATO have done here. So, again, the United States is continuing to commit resources. NATO is. Grain shipments actually got out of Ukraine, headed to various ports. But boy, again, we're now 6 months into this. no end in sight. All right, now, despite what we call the Inflation Production Act or the Inflation Enhancement Act, there's a couple things you need to know about. You know, in that act, there was actually a tax, 16.4 cents a gallon on gasoline, 16.4 cents, per barrel of oil. Small tax, but nonetheless a tax on oil. What have we told you many times? If you want more of something, tax it less. But because of inflation, and those of you on Social Security are going to appreciate this, Social Security benefits may increase close to 10% this year. What's that going to do to the budget deficit? It's going to further explode it, of course. Think about that for a minute. What it's also going to do is going to cause people to have to pay some taxes back because of increased Social Security earnings. This inflation, folks, is causing the average American to pay an extra $717 a month. That's a lot of money to an average person out of their paycheck every month. You know, annualize that, it's close to $10,000. And when the average American's earning about $50,000 to $54,000 a year, split the baby, call it $52,000, you can see why people were really up against it. Now, as we've told you, oil prices have now come down 61 days in a row. We flagged this weeks ago. Why is one of the reasons oil prices are coming down? Speculators in the oil market are realizing, China's really slowing down. And when I say really slowing, that economy in China is slowing severely. You know, they've got a property bubble over in China where they built all these apartment buildings that nobody lives in. So there's a lot of excess capacity in China. And then with this insane Chinese zero COVID policy, now all of a sudden you're saying, well, wait a minute. China's economy is slowing, zero COVID policy in China. What happens to demand? Demand falls. You've got more Iranian oil potentially coming on the market. Yeah. The Iranians, the ones that wanted to assassinate Mike Pompeo and John Bolton. That's it, same Iranians. The same government the Biden administration is trying to revive the nuclear deal on. Yep, that's them. But when you combine oil down 61 straight days, average price of a gallon of gas now is $3.92. Still up 40% from the beginning of the year. But when you cut out demand from China and you have the situation with the Russians where the Europeans are weaning themselves off Russian oil, oil's about $87 a barrel today, down about $4 or $5 from its close on Friday. Now you have a situation where all of a sudden demand's not there. We flagged this China thing weeks ago. We were telling it, demand in China is going to slow. And boy, did it ever. And you know, the thing is this, folks, when they tell you it's slow in China, and that's the official version, you know it's much worse than that because you get the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda. It's probably a lot slower. You don't get $5 a barrel decline in oil if there's not something major happening. Markets see through this. So, you know, more Iranian oil, major slowdowns in China, zero COVID policy. So, oil prices have come down, and people are finally starting to realize, oh, geez, oil's in everything. That's right. Pretty much everything, anything to do with plastics, packaging, transportation, oil's involved. Now, it's certainly helping Americans paying less at the pump. So we applaud that. That's a good thing. But always try to understand the underlying reasons why. And I go back to this. At the height, when prices were really ticking up, causing a lot of pain, a good part of that chunk is there was too much money chasing too few goods, classic definition of inflation, and the Biden administration that had done everything they could to hamper the oil industry and the pipeline industry. You know it. We talked about it ad nauseum. But that's, again, contributing factors. Now, one thing that's not going down is these food prices. And for all you people that rent, boy, I tell you what, those rent costs are still escalating. And the risk is, okay, between food prices still staying high, rent prices still staying high, you want to avoid a wage price spiral at all costs, all efforts. You don't want that. A lot of people say, well, market's great, we get more wages. Yeah, but if it spirals up, then the Fed will be forced to raise interest rates faster, and that we don't want that. That's not a good thing. But inflation remains high, and again, despite last week when Biden actually said, well, we have zero inflation. No, we didn't have that, and he knew better. What he really meant was that we didn't have an increase. So with oil ticking down, again, you're seeing price declines for 61 straight days. That's a good thing. But always think, why did it go up so fast and why is it coming down? When you have zero COVID policy in China, which is insane, we all know that, and you have an economy slowing, too much property, too many apartments, too many buildings, there you have it. Now, let's say China fixes some of those issues, which they probably will. Then you could have a situation where, okay, demand starts coming back from China. U.S. economy picks up a little speed, increasing demand here. The other thing that you had, when a gasoline out here in California, I remember when we had to pay like $7.60 a gallon. It was insane. And I think when the average price of a gallon of gas across the country hit close to $5.10 a gallon, you literally have what's called demand destruction. At a certain price point, people say, I can't take it anymore. Enough's enough. And they just won't buy it. And they'll cut down on their travel. That happened. So when you add all these factors in about cutting back at a certain price point, you reached the point of pain. China, Russia. Plus, again, one thing the administration's doing, we talked about this, they're still releasing a million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Well, that's going to end in September. So the thing to keep your eye on here, folks, is will China come back? Does something happen to that Russian oil? Does the American economy pick up steam? If those are the cases, you could easily see oil back above $100 and then could be going back. All right. Now, let's get into some politics here. Of course, you knew we'd talk about it. That loudmouth knucklehead, Beto O'Rourke, Robert Francis O'Rourke, the loudmouth in Texas, the guy that created a scene after the Uvalde murders. Well, guess what? Governor Greg Abbott is leading O'Rourke by 7 to 10 points in Texas. That's no surprise to us. We've talked about that. Abbott's doing a lot of things people in Texas like. But again, 10 points seems a little outlier to me. I've always thought that race would come down and be reasonably close. 4 or 5 points, 6 points maybe. If he wins by 7 to 10, it's not going to surprise me. But just because there's a lot of Republicans in Texas. But here again, they ran O'Rourke, who lost to Ted Cruz for Senate. Now he's back trying to unseat Abbott for governor. And he's a radical leftist, folks. He's one of those Austinites, Moscow on the Colorado. That's what they call it. Oh, Texas has a good governor in Greg Abbott. We don't agree with him on everything, but generally he's done a pretty good job down there. The state's booming. People are moving there. It's no coincidence that red states like Idaho, like Montana, like Texas, like Florida, and like some of the southern states, they're getting an influx of people. Why? Because people want to go where they're treated friendly, where the government's not on their back all the time. And you're going to continue to see migration. Now, also on the ballot, we actually have more primaries. There's a couple important ones tomorrow. Alaska. Now, here's the two headline people are Senator Lisa Murkowski and former governor and former vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin are on the ballot. Murkowski's running for her Senate seat. Palin's running for seat in the House of Representatives from Alaska. Now, Alaska has a thing called ranked choice voting, where you actually rank your candidates 1 through 4. So unless someone gets a plurality of, I think it's 50%, yeah, they're going to have a runoff again in the fall. So my guess is, if they didn't have ranked choice voting, Palin could probably win tomorrow. Murkowski, I don't know. That's going to be a tighter race. But I think both those races, the House race in Alaska and that Senate race, may head over to the fall with multiple candidates because of the way they have the ranked choice voting. But we'll keep an eye on that. We'll have results for you on Wednesday on that one. And then another one that really has gained a lot of national attention here, Wyoming. Now, is it D-Day for Liz Cheney against Harriet Hagerman? Well, if you listen to what the polling says, Hagerman's going to defeat Cheney by quite a wide margin. We'll see. Cheney's a well-known name in the state of Wyoming, but her stance against the president and these actions on the 1-6 committee they have really ticked off a lot of Republicans in Wyoming. Now, I know a lot of Democrats have come out for Cheney. Some Democrats even switched parties to vote for Cheney. At the end of the day, I don't think that's going to matter. Now, whether Cheney wins or loses tomorrow, and right now she's heavily favored to lose, I don't think you've seen the last of her. We'll see what happens down the road. But it does look like, think about this. And we've talked about this for months. The 2 Republicans on that January 6th committee, Adam Kinzinger, he decided not to run for election, and Liz Cheney is likely to lose tomorrow. Why did Pelosi not allow the Jim Jordans of the world to be on that committee? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they didn't want them. They didn't want anyone that was going to defend Donald Trump, because the purpose of this was to get Trump off the ballot. But we'll see. We're going to keep an eye on that. Again, same thing Wednesday. We'll know the results on Wednesday. Could we see surprises? Sure. But not likely. Now, finally, word about the 1-year anniversary of I'll just call it the Afghanistan debacle. 1 year ago, and boy, did that place turn into a disaster. Not only was the exit from Afghanistan a complete disaster, a debacle, choose your metaphor, and we lost 13 Americans in the process. You remember the scenes of people grabbing onto the wheels of airplanes, chaos everywhere. Well, I'll tell you what's really chaos if you're a woman and you live in Afghanistan. This country has turned back into the disaster it was before we ever came over there. Ruled by the Taliban. Women can't, get educated past, I think, the 4th grade? Some ridiculous number. They're not allowed to have jobs. I mean, the country it's fallen right back to the old Taliban structure. And the sad thing is, against advice from his military and NATO, Biden took that unilateral decision, and the exit was just a complete debacle. And you know what that coincided with, folks? When people saw how incompetent the president was in that debacle, that's when his poll numbers started cratering. Remember, Biden at one point, before that Afghanistan disaster, his approval rating was like 52, 53%. Dropped all the way into the mid-30s. Now it's hovering around 40. So that was the start of it. And a lot of commentators are saying, it did not have to happen. The United States hadn't been in meaningful combat in Afghanistan since 2014. But again, we can't go back and rewrite history. We're just reporting on it now. Again, 1 year ago, look at the difference in that country now versus then. Just terrible. But look, these are big election days coming up tomorrow. A lot of stuff happening. We'll keep an eye out for this Trump stuff for you. Again, whatever side of the political aisle you're on, this raid, it's a raid, folks. I know the media likes to change the name, but no, it was a raid. And we're like everybody else. We'd like more information. Why did it have to go down the way it went down? Tell us, Mr. Director of the FBI, Wray. Tell us, Merrick Garland, why did it go down the way it did? And we'll keep an eye out. We're going to cut the spin, obviously, and tell you what's real and what's propaganda. All right, Biden's on vacation. Good for him. The country's not, okay? So elections continue. People will get out and vote. We're going to have a lot to talk about on Wednesday. Well, we've got a great guest lineup this week. It's always fun as we start off. And NFL season's back for all the football aficionados. Preseason games are in full gear. So we got a lot to keep you informed about. And we'll stay on top of it for you. So again, thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening today. We'll be back tomorrow. Great guest lineup this week. See you on Tuesday. Have a good evening.